It's time for us to welcome Kobus Schoeman to the floor to chat to us a little bit about Grow on Africa clubs and social clubs. I'm going to let you introduce yourself for those who don't know you, but I also don't think there's much introduction needed. So guys, Kobus, there you go.
So, lekker. Happy Bathurst. Yeah. We're at a very interesting stage of the industry, especially with this legislative lacuna that we've been left in. It's a gap in law. That's basically what it's about. And we've heard earlier today about options of permits for hemp, and we've heard about licenses for medicinal cannabis. But everything in between is like completely unspoken about and ignored and kind of left up, to our own devices. And it's an interesting stage we're in because now it's been decriminalized. But the only thing decriminalized is possession, cultivation, and use by an adult in private. That's it. No clarity yet or an explicit ban on trade of any cannabis, part of the plant, any product, seed, cannabis containing product. And then obviously the legislation comes in with percentages just to differentiate between hemp and what they call cannabis. So it's a terrible spot to be in as a young industry, where there's so much potential. You've got like one hand tied behind your back, you're still shackled by legislation that is so archaic that you cannot even acquire a seed, which means if by some miracle the seed falls down here and it rolls down on the floor and I pick it up, I'm considered a drug dealer, because I acquired a cannabis seed. And that's still where we are, and I think a lot of people forget that. Now, we're all fighting it in a certain way. We're all trying to really push the boundaries and really trying to set an example, I guess, because it's amazing to see all the interest from outside. I mean, just in our country, people are driving all across the country just to come to this event because there is a flippant place like this. And I want to thank the people that make it happen. It's like Chris J that forced them to have cannabis at this agri show, Yeah, what a legend. That's how it started, right? He just entered a plant into all the categories he could until they couldn't say no, until he won the category and they had to make a cannabis category. So that's how you do it. And in this, so after decriminalization, we're now in a phase of legalization. Now, fortunately, legislation follows industry. We spoke earlier when Marlene mentioned about hemp permits and the processing thereof, and it boils down to that we've got to do it, and then we can legislate it, all right? But the manner in which we do it, and the way we conduct ourselves, and that bar we set is then our responsibility, to decide what this industry is going to look like moving forward. So we've received a lot of flack as a movement, as a company, Grow on Africa, for just that, for setting the bar too high. As simple as that. Completely over-regulating to the extent where it's difficult to do what we do, like very difficult. It's got a lot of limiting factors to it. You can always, loosen those restrictions. You can always make it easier to participate as soon as there's a legislative framework. But we decided to take the route of over-regulating so that we can set the best possible example. So this current constitutional ruling is what created the space for something like clubs to happen. It's an international example. It's happened on most continents where people are taking chances and pushing the boundaries. And what we really see value in this model is to really bring the benefication back to communities. So not big corporates, not just some big license holder who can afford 5 or 10 or 100 million rand. The real small entrepreneur, the small person that can take part as part of a community and then supply services to one another. So that it's awesome to say that we've opened 29 clubs so far. We've closed 6 of them. One of them closed on their own account, just being a small club, not having a lot of traction. The others being clubs that did not keep to the regulations. Simple as that. People who couldn't stick to the self-regulating model that was set up. Within those clubs, there's currently, I see the flyers say 6,700 members. Fissy, I think it's a bit more this week. 7,100 this week. In that, there's around about 1,200 jobs that's been created, like real jobs. I see a couple of people here that are also getting pay slips for that. And it was a blessing to sit, and a curse, to sit a month ago with SARS, SAFRA, Department of Agriculture, very fancy place in Sandton. And everybody's complaining there's not enough jobs being created in cannabis. There's not enough taxes being paid. And I could give them those figures, and I could also prove to them that close to 4.7 million rand in direct taxes just from these people I was talking about has been paid in the last 2.5 years. So they've got to start taking us seriously. But why it's such a double-edged sword is in that same week, the cops raided one of the most beautiful projects that I've ever seen. Father Mark in Oudtshoorn pulled out 60 plants without a warrant, without an arrest being made, just destroying his plants. A couple of weeks later, there was another cultivator that the police acted on a tip-off, and they actually arrested the key holder of the tunnel. So that's a criminal case that's going to start now. So on the one side, we're building the economy, we're putting these models in place, we're proposing legislation, people are actually listening. We are working with the right people, the Agricultural Research Council, Department of Agriculture, the institutions of higher learning, the Indigenous Knowledge System centers. But we have to still feel like criminals on the other end. And I've got to say the industry is also playing a part in that happening, because we visited the Cannabis Expo last week in Cape Town. Now, a lot of the vendors were dealing straight up, over the counter, displaying products. There were even people selling psilocybin mushrooms. I could buy edibles containing psilocybin mushrooms and THC. What is the example we're trying to set, right? If we want to do an event and call it "Let's take a chance and see how far we can get with plant medicine convention," I'm in for that, okay? I'll attend that, sounds like a super lekker party. If we're going to be doing cannabis industry and we want to build this thing, we want to be taken seriously, we've got to stop with this nonsense. We're going to play this game right, okay? There's legislation in place. The law has not changed yet. We can push it and build it as much as we can. And I think at least taking the steps of using a model like a club and using existing regulations, using international examples, try and self-regulate and set up your community so that you can look after yourselves. The club model is exactly that. We're a bunch of people that feel exactly the same. We are passionate about our country. We want to build it up. We want to see a future for our kids here. And we see that cannabis is the spearhead crop that we need to start waking people up to the wealth that we've got in the plants that's around us. And we contract property out between members. It's a private lease for a portion of cultivation area where a member's plant is grown. The cultivator is also employed by an employment agreement to grow this plant for the owner of the plant. Grow on Africa acts as a service provider that sets up the model. Each club is an independent club, non-profit company, registered non-profit company. Their own constitution, their own set of rules that's in line with the GOA model. GOA administrates all of these lease agreements and employment contracts between the cultivating members and the owners of the plants, and also supply the systems to the clubs that they use within the club to administrate the cannabis and share the cannabis, or our members share it amongst themselves. So the extent of our systems, that's the extent of our systems. It also then facilitates IRP5s, pay slips for the cultivating members, and then we also deal with all of the reimbursements on the leases and salaries. So it is incredible that we have to put so much effort and energy into being innovative, to act within a space where there's no laws. But it's just that space that doesn't have laws. There's a lot of other regulations that you can just tick the boxes off. And I think that's what the clubs are kind of showing at the moment. That it is a viable option for the little guy to be part of this massive industry at a level where it's not just economically viable, but it's scalable. You've got career path, you know. One of the most beautiful examples, we've had a cultivator that worked at a cannabis club, that cultivated for that club, that studied at Chiba, first African cannabis institution, that put his CV on LinkedIn and is now running a medical facility in Portugal. You know? So, and that's within a year and a half, 18 months. Okay? So it is there, it is an option. Okay? The world is open to us. But it's up to us to make sure that we do it responsibly. So this year our focus in Goa and the clubs is focused on harm reduction. We've seen a lot of that. Everybody's talking about responsible cannabis use, but what is it? What are we talking about? I've seen people pass out smoking a bong or hitting a dab. Okay? I've seen at the expo now people having no idea what they're putting into their faces because it's either mislabeled so people don't get into trouble when they've got it or selling it. So people don't know they're putting THC in their bodies because it's labeled CBD, or they don't know the dosages, or it hasn't been lab tested. So we're really focusing on that this year. We've seen in our family, in our extended family, what influence there is when cannabis is mixed with other substances, specifically alcohol. South Africa's got a massive drinking culture, to the extent where you could drink a double brandy and coke anywhere at the Cannabis Expo. But when I lit up my first joint in the smoking area, I was told not to do so. And then we just over-smoked them. I did ask them to get a cop to explain the rules to me. And then the beard showed up from the mammoth, and we just over-smoked it. But we see the impact it's having on our communities. So harm reduction needs to start within the community, and the social club's a great way just to initiate that conversation. Another thing we're focusing on is awareness and education. It's this green rush. On the one side, you've got people from the Department of Agriculture who needs to issue permits because the president said we must open this thing up. So they follow the rules and they issue the permits, but there's no plan. Northwest alone, when I reached out and tried to get information on permits, they asked us if we could help them to track it. So we just set up a little thing that we can now gather information for the Northwest permits. I asked the question earlier, is anybody looking at who is importing what seed into the country? Who's going to plant what where? Who's making these plans? Because the offtakes are there. We don't know what the stuff will look like that we're trying to grow. So we can't say what the product's going to look like that we're trying to make. So who cares about the offtake at this point? Grow the flipping stuff. If you want to industrialize something, you've got to industrialize it. So importing seed for cannabis seems ridiculous to me. I mean, it is absolutely insane. We've got people here that visit our country to come and have a look at what is naturally here, you know. I actually apologized to them and said, "Shit, guys, you're doing our work, you know. You're coming here and you're doing amazing stuff and you're doing research on our land races, and everybody in the or a majority of the people in the cannabis industry is just chasing this quick dollar, you know. Just we've got to make money out of this thing now. What's happening in 5 years? What's happening in 10 years?" So the social clubs is a lot more than a structure or model that's using a loophole to operate within. There's no loophole. There's no law. We are just as against the law as any SAFRA permit, any guy growing cannabis in that. We need regulations on this. We are constantly busy as an organization giving our inputs to the portfolio committee on the cannabis bill. it's going to be amazing when they open it up for public comment again now. It's the best thing they could have done. So public comment can start coming in, and apparently that should happen from somewhere in April. Yeah, let's hold our thumbs, because they've had 24 months. It's been 48, 50, yeah, a bit more, right? Was it 48 in September? We're in March already again. You see? So how long are we going to wait for proper legislation? I don't know. So from a regulations perspective, that's also something that we will start proposing now. There's various ways to formalize ourselves as a community and join industry associations and join things like a marijuana board or something where we can regulate ourselves as the industry. And let's propose our legislations there. Let's put these proposed bills in there ourselves, okay? Let this become our public comment, because we need regulations. We non-industrial, non-medicinal, right? There's nothing happening in that space. Non-industrial, non-medicinal. The private purposes bill is a start, but if you're a responsible cannabis user, entrepreneur, you must give your inputs in this bill, and you must give your support and your real thoughts to this, you know, because you can't come back in 5 years' time complaining that someone is regulating you. So I feel clubs are there to stay. I think clubs will continue to thrive. The clubs that are focused on what the core values are about. The core values being care for the people so they can care for the earth, so we can share in the surplus. And that's pretty simple, you know. So whether we're growing ganja for each other, making cookies for each other, making creams for each other, if you're doing vegetables or any other service, like the latest edition of a service like that is the Canna Express newspaper. After 12 digital editions, this is the 13th, first print edition, all local, all cannabis news, and this will be coming out monthly. So also educating. We need some physical things that can be left behind in places, in communities, where we can start teaching them about the human life cycle, the plant life cycle, cannabis being the human companion plant. What is the harm reduction around cannabis that is required? And how do we use cannabis as the harm reduction measure for our human life cycle? So, if you haven't joined the club yet, there's a club right outside. I think they're offering free memberships. If you join, you can visit any of the associated clubs nationwide. If you're a cultivator or a processor that's interested to cultivate or process for a club, it's as simple as joining the club, having a chat to them. Each club's got a compliance officer. They deal with the needs of the club. When you sign up, you'll see you've got to enter things like your monthly requirement, what type of cannabis you require, in which format. Those needs assessments are then used against cultivation and processing plans set up by cultivators and processors. Our system marries the two and contracts out these services. So it's worth it to start a relationship with your club. We've got various of the 1,200 people. The 1,200 people are all permanently employed in cannabis only, right? But I think the numbers were fishy. How many businesses have started in the last 2.5 years?
100, 200.
And yeah, so
Directly,
indirectly.
Yeah,
So it's got such a beautiful ripple effect, you know. And it's not a spider. It's not McDonald's or big corporate where everybody is in the same thing, and if their head gets cut, it's a dead spider. This is a starfish. And what I love about starfish is if you chop the arm, it can become another starfish. Okay? Cool's that. So, independent communities operating within a bigger picture, and what we need to do is just set the standards, not sentences. I heard Jeremy Acton today saying from the back it's an insult. I feel the same way, that they want to give police the right to come and count plants within your yard. And you can become either a dealer or a trafficker by having 1-2 plants, many, you know. What's next? How many tomatoes you can grow? How many beans? Okay, can't do oranges anymore. You know? So we've got to draw the line somewhere. And being as responsible as possible, use this cannabis spearhead and rip this thing wide open. So, happy days. That's all from me. Any questions, you're welcome to shoot. And then most of the conversations happen outside in the tent anyway. Yeah. Lucky. Thanks.
Are we?
Lucky.
Well done.
Happy days.